Hello and welcome. This is Jeremy from Legal Studies Advantage. In this video, I'd like to provide you with a brief overview of the subject of property law. Number 1, overview. There are many different types of property, rights in property, and types of ownership of property. Those are the basic subject areas that are likely to be taught in your law school course. By far the most important type of property in a law school property law course is real property, or in other words, land and buildings and so forth. Number 2, interests and rights in land. The property rights that one has depends largely on the type of ownership interest they have. This is often referred to as an estate. Ownership, or an estate, is created when rights in land are transferred to a person. This transfer is called a grant, and the document that accomplishes the grant is called a deed. Present estates include the different types of ownership interests created in the person to whom the property is initially transferred. These are, for example, the fee simple absolute, the fee tail, the life estate, the fee simple determinable, the fee simple subject to an executory interest, and the fee simple subject to a condition subsequent. Future interests include the different types of ownership interest that may follow that of the person to whom the property is initially transferred. Examples of these include reversion, remainder, the contingent remainder, vested remainders subject to open, the vested remainder subject to defeasance, the possibility of reverter, the executory interest, and the right of re-entry. As a continuation of number 2, interest and rights in land, the rule against perpetuities, also known as RAP, is a complex legal rule that prevents the transfer of property interests where ownership of the interest may remain uncertain for too long. The law disfavors long-term ownership uncertainty because it hinders economic and commercial activity and so forth. Joint estates. In many cases, multiple people can own a single parcel of real property. Some of the common types of joint property ownership include the tenancy in common, the joint tenancy, and tenancy by the entirety. An individual may have several other types of property rights that do not include actually possessing the land, but may allow some types of use of the land, and so forth. These include, for example, easements, covenants, equitable servitudes, licenses, and profits. Number 3, title transfers. Property ownership, or title, is transferred in multiple ways, but most often occurs by sale or gift. In the case of real property, remember that refers to buildings and land and so forth, that transfer usually involves one of several different types of deeds. Important parts of the purchase and sale process consist of signing a contract for purchase and consummating the purchase at closing, which is the formal ceremony that finalizes the transaction and conveys the property by deed to the new owners. There are several different types of deeds, which contain different covenants or promises by the seller, also known as the grantor, to the buyer, also known as the grantee, the person receiving the property. Some of the most important deeds are the quitclaim deed, the special warranty deed, and the general warranty deed. That last one, the general warranty deed, includes 6 important covenants regarding the transaction and the ownership of the land. Recording statutes play an important part in determining who the rightful owner of the land is, where it was sold to 2 different buyers by a mischievous seller. 3 important types of recording statutes are res statutes, notice statutes, and res notice statutes. Adverse possession describes the change of ownership to a new person by essentially taking use and possession of the land without the permission or opposition of the previous owner. This is ownership that can arise from what is often termed squatting on the land. Just as property ownership can be transferred by sale or taken by adverse possession, so also can it be transferred by meeting the elements of a valid gift. Number 4, mortgages and foreclosures. A mortgage is a security interest in real property given by a person to a lender, like a bank, usually in exchange for a loan from the bank to purchase the property itself. If the buyer fails to make payments on the loan to the bank can foreclose on the property, essentially taking ownership from the buyer-borrower. The bank can then sell the property to recoup the money that was lent to the buyer-borrower, but that was not repaid to the bank. In some circumstances, redemption allows the property to be taken back by the buyer-borrower from the bank. Number 5, landlord and tenant law. This area of the law deals with the duties and rights of landlords and tenants that arise from property interests called leaseholds, where the tenant can possess and use the property that is actually owned by another person, the landlord. This is what we typically think of when we refer to a rental arrangement. Important leasehold interests include the tenancy at will, the tenancy for years, and the periodic tenancy, as well as the tenancy at sufferance. This last one, the tenancy at sufferance, is the type of possessory interest held by someone who is a wrongful holdover, a tenant who stays after their legitimate tenancy has already terminated. The landlord in that case is entitled to collect rent as long as the tenant remains. The tenancy at sufferance would terminate when the tenant is either evicted or another tenancy is created or agreed to by the landlord and the tenant. Also important in the area of landlord and tenant law are the topics of subleasing and assignment. Number 6. Miscellaneous. Property law touches many other areas not covered above, such as zoning and variances, eminent domain, water rights, tort liability of landowners, and so forth. That concludes our brief overview of the subject of property law. Please visit our website at www.1lsuccess.com or www.legalstudiesadvantage.com for more information about how our 1L Success package can help you to succeed in law school. That's www.1lsuccess.com with the number 1 or www.legalstudiesadvantage.com. Legal Studies Advantage, LLC. Reinventing legal education.